This is Lessons in the Challenges of Leadership, the series that enables managers to achieve the remarkable. Podcast, video, short reads, brought to you by Being Learning. Conceived, developed and presented by Siebert Neathling.
In episode 1, we defined the 6 elements of strategy. In episode 2, we used a real-life example to show how the elements are integrated. So let's recap what it means to be strategic. It involves at least 6 things. You have to anticipate what the future holds. You must evaluate what you're good at and what you're not so good at. You have to identify your goals or your ideal future state. You have to develop a plan to get you there. You have to make sure that the plan is understood and supported by those who have to implement it, and that they are able to implement it. And you have to actually manage the implementation. So having spent some time simplifying things, it's a good idea to add some complexity back into it. If it were that easy to be strategic, everyone would be good at it. So here are a few complexities. To do a thorough evaluation requires a realistic self-appraisal, and most of us are not good at this. We either overestimate our abilities or underestimate ourselves. These human flaws are difficult to appreciate without some honest and competent external support. We're also terrible at anticipation. When I was a child, for example, I was convinced that people would soon live on the moon and that flying cars would be a normal feature of my life. But I did not predict a phone in my pocket that would also be a sophisticated camera, computer, games device, language tutor, GPS, etc. Not only are we imperfect futurists, we are also biased. If you are passionate about starting a business, you are very likely to exaggerate potential positives and minimize the threats. This is a genuine challenge and the reason why so many startups fail. But we also know that without this positive bias, we are unlikely to ever try new ventures. But being strategic can help you direct your energy to where it is most needed. We can also be terrible at aspiration. Sometimes we aspire to things that end up being the wrong goals, ones that don't have the impact or effect we thought they would. Sometimes we strive for tangible material results, but lose the main purpose of why we exist as a team or an organization in the first place. Sometimes we are not ambitious enough in our aspiration. Sometimes we overreach, and often organizations develop mission statements that are either abjectly deceptive or laughably grandiose. The last complexity I'd like to address is an important one. I've worked with and alongside literally thousands of leaders, from frontline supervisors to middle managers and senior leaders, and the complaint I hear most often is that they do not have time to be strategic. Dealing with day-to-day problems, the pressure of business as usual, demanding senior managers and clients, or even meetings and external commitments make it impossible to be anything more than tactical and reactive. Now, I sympathize with this. I often have to work long hours, and some weeks feel like a blur of activity with little direction or progress. But I have learned to make time to be strategic as an absolute leadership priority. And I assure you, the most effective leaders I know, the people I admire most, are all good at being strategic. And this is not just my finding. In his wonderful old book, Stephen Covey identifies quadrant 2 thinking, working on the important but not urgent tasks as a priority over the mundane but seemingly urgent tasks of leadership. And this is one of the 7 habits of highly effective people. He writes a simple analogy. He talks of seeing someone struggling to saw through a log. When he eventually asks the person why it takes so long, the man says, well, the saw is blunt. And when he is asked why he doesn't sharpen the saw, the man says, I don't have time. I've always found that such a profound analogy and a perfect metaphor for the many leaders I see who fail to be strategic. You have to make time for it, for planning, researching alternative solutions, even just thinking. In the credits at the end of this series, I thank all the wonderful leaders I've worked with whose wisdom informs this series. One of the standouts is a senior lawyer in a prestigious law firm. I met him as part of a senior executive coaching program, and when we discussed this issue of time, he shared his remarkable system with me. He said, "Give me any date between 1987 and now." And I said, 26 May 2003. He went to the storage area behind his office and brought out a ring binder labeled 2002-3. He flipped to the relevant page, flipped open the clip, and produced a sheet of paper which he unfolded and read with a smile. That was the week of 26 May to 1 June. During that week, I worked on the following strategic issues. I did some coaching with one of my star juniors to help her build her confidence in selling herself. I researched the market to see what opportunities there were for expanding into legal services for film and television production. And I established contact with an old university colleague of mine who had just moved to Scotland to see if I could pick up any of his local clients. And he randomly pulled out another few weeks from the ring binder to share his strategic actions for those weeks. Improving himself, improving his team, discovering new opportunities, planning for the future. He told me that he used to get very frustrated at not having enough time for important things. So he took Covey's 4 quadrants approach and created his own system to follow it. Every Sunday evening, he would prepare for the week ahead. He liked doing it then because he was then ready to get going first thing on Monday morning and started the week with clear direction. He would take an A3 sheet of paper and fold it in half. In the top right corner, he would write the dates of the upcoming week. He then opened the sheet to form a left and right side and used a ruler to draw a horizontal line halfway across the opened up page. This formed 4 quadrants. He would then label the top left quadrant matters. He then numbered and wrote down a list of the legal matters he was going to work on during that week. He then labeled the top right quadrant strategic. And then he wrote down the 3 strategic things he was going to do that week. He only ever wrote down 3 things because he found that if there were more, he would not get to all of them. He labeled the bottom left quadrant other. Here he listed all the other typically more administrative tasks that he had to accomplish in a week. The bottom right quadrant he left blank for doodling and random notes. This represented Covey's quadrant 4, the not important, not urgent. Why do them at all? Now, this amazing leader would then keep his sheet of paper on his desk all week. He would tick off things as he did them, always ensuring that he first prioritized his matters, the urgent, important work. What really made his system work is that he showed a great deal of discipline about his 3 strategic items. He made a rule. He would not go home on a Thursday evening until he had done all 3 his strategic tasks. Sometimes he would finish them earlier in the week, but with the usual pressure of work, he would often not be able to get to them early. He chose Thursday evenings as his deadline because he found that if he left them until Friday, he would sometimes not get to them. His wife knew that he would get home late on some Thursdays because he would simply not leave his office until those were done. Meeting him and seeing how he has implemented this simple system helped me enormously. I shamelessly copied his method and found an immediate improvement in my confidence to always be strategic. As time went by, I modified my sheets to include a few other details, like tick boxes for a few standard weekly activities. Unlike my lawyer friend, I list more than 3 strategic items because of the nature of my work. When I started using an iPad, I made a template in PowerPoint, saved it as a PDF, and imported it into a Notes app. I can now go back several years and tell you exactly what I achieved strategically in any given week. I find it very useful to view my whole week at a glance like that. Whatever way you do it, stop saying that you don't have time to be strategic. It is just not a good excuse for any serious leader. If it means giving up something else in order to be strategic, then do it. If it means working late one evening, then do it. In following episodes, we will look at performance and some of the other ways to overcome the challenges of time and resourcing. And remember, this series covers 9 different challenges of leadership: strategy, culture, change, collaboration, performance, growth, innovation, communication, and resilience. In the next episode, we start our series on culture. See you then.